when I came to the US, I was going to do engineering, and then I decided not to do it. And this was a very pivotal point, that how would I go tell my father that spending all this money for me coming out here to do something, how do I go tell him I don't want to do it, or I cannot do it, more importantly. The green card process was something that just grounded me to one place, right? Fortunately or unfortunately. The moment you surround yourself with people, right? People that will help you be successful, that can be a true catalyst in a lot of things, right? Be it your, if you pursue sports, your career, relationships, or whatever it is.
Welcome to Story2here, where we share unique stories of Indian immigrants who have made it to the US. I'm Abhishek, your host, where we share their experiences, struggles, and triumphs with you. If you're looking for guidance and want to get inspired by fellow Indians who had similar background and struggles growing up, this is the place for you.
Get started. So, Akshay, where are you now today? I know you've been traveling.
Yeah, so today I am lucky to be home. I'm in Washington, D.C. I live in Virginia, which is what they call the DMV, D.C., Maryland, Virginia. So I live on the Virginia side of the DMV area.
Okay, so you're like close to a lot of monuments and like CIA and Pentagon and all of those areas, right? Is that correct?
Yes, close is relative, but I'm in driving distance. I'll just call it that.
Oh yeah.
I have family members that probably live stone throw away distance from the CIA. So.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, it is definitely cool to be in this area. There's a lot. There's a lot of interesting things that happen in the district, right? Of course, right. So you're going to get those. Plus, there is a lot of culture. There is history. Virginia as a state has been very instrumental in how the modern U.S. history has been shaped, right? So it's really cool to be in this part of the country.
So on Arlington, I mean, did you bump into any politician or people like that in those areas, or?
Yeah, a few of them. I have congressmen, senators. I've run into them. I have I've hosted campaign fundraising for candidates as well.
Oh,
so it's cool. It's definitely cool to see the process and how things move. It's definitely.
Oh, wow. Well, it's interesting because so coming from India, like the way politics is done in India is so different from here. Like you have this more formal fundraising for candidates, and well, though in India, like when you say politician, there is this whole thing about collusion or bribery, and all of that sort of comes along with all of that. But here it is more sophisticated. I mean, this is, I mean, people don't, like, the trust in politicians have gone down in the US over the years, but I think still it's more formalized than what we have in India, right?
Definitely. I think there is much more structure and formality to the things that, there is a process certainly in how you want to engage your representatives, right? Wherever you are, how you do fundraising or how you do lobbying, if it's a word to be used.
Yeah.
For, your interests, special interests, or if you're part of like political action committees and things like that. So, I mean, it is, in the discipline of the law, there is a lot you can do to influence a certain, aspects of, be it legislation or if it is got to do with other things that you want to influence. I mean, there is certainly a lot more structure. Now, again, I will admit I don't know much about the Indian political system, so I don't want to say that there is one better than the other or there is one more legal than the other. But I have been here long enough now that I feel like I know the system here a lot more than I know the system.
Yeah. Well, I think these are anecdotal, right? So I can't also vouch for that. I know either one of them. I can see from outside, and media covers it. That's how the information comes in. So, yeah, I mean, interesting place, and I like interesting that you are already involved in all of these things, which are some sort of an interesting thing. So, on that note, I wanted to sort of ask you about your background. Like, so you're now in DC. That where did your journey start? Like, I mean, your childhood. How was it?
It was wonderful. I started my journey. My childhood starts back in India in Mumbai.
Oh,
Bombay. For me, it will always remain Bombay, and I usually always address it as Bombay. So I grew up there. I still have family, friends, a lot of friends, extended family that still live in Bombay.
mm,
I was there till probably I was 17 years old, and I came to the US to pursue my undergraduate degree.
mm, mm,
So I did that. I graduated in 2002. When I graduated, if some of the people who may be watching this, or I don't know if you remember, 2001 to 3 was not exactly the greatest time to be graduating in America. September 11 had just happened. The economy was in not a great shape. A lot of jobs. I knew people who were offered jobs that the jobs were rescinded. So it wasn't a great time to graduate. But I was fortunate that I was able to get an internship during my time in college. And once I finished my internship, the same employer, it was General Electric, they offered me a full-time position in a pretty cool program. It is, I think, still called the Information Management Leadership Program. So it's
Okay.
a rotational program. They send you to different locations, different projects, different teams, different business problem, and a different GE business altogether, right? So this is very dynamic. So I did that for about 2 years. Then once I graduated the program, I got a full-time, what they call it, a full-time role with the GE businesses. And then I was in that role, I probably want to say like 7 to 8 months. And then I was bored doing the same thing. And I had some other personal reasons and I decided to leave. I was in Connecticut at the time. Decided to leave Connecticut and move to the Virginia area, which is where my then girlfriend, now my wife, was working. So yeah, this is my home for a while.
So I think so Bombay. I think this is interesting. And August also was from Bombay, and one of the question I asked was, so from your last name, looks like you're Punjabi. I could be wrong. And you getting raised in Bombay, and I think like as you were growing up, what was the, I would say, culture, I won't say culture, but kind of surrounding environment as you were growing in Bombay as a child? Was it like normally Indian families have a lot of expectation from their kids? Was that the same for you from your parents? And then how were you as you were growing up? Like a lot of times people think who have made it big in the US, they would have everything sorted in childhood, like they would be like, they know what they want in their life and all of that. So were you a person who was always knew where you wanted to be, and how was your like parenting style of your parents?
So I'll say I was very fortunate with my childhood, with my parents who really shaped a lot of my thinking that I have now, right? And a lot of that, I'll say started with a very important component of trust. I'll say my parents always believed in, as I was being raised, and we grew up in a joint family. I have an older brother, and I have a lot of cousins. One of the things that I did see my parents, especially my father, is that he would not always treat me and my brother like children, right? I mean, as children, he would treat us almost as someone that he could talk very openly to. Like, so be it like growing up, be it whether it was career or it was, other things. I'm sure as growing up, we all would talk to our parents about different issues or whatever it might be. My father's advice and style of conversation was very pragmatic, as he would be talking to an adult, or he would would reason things with me in a more I'll say adult-like manner versus like a child, or just enforce his point of view without having to reason. So with everything that I would do or we would do, right, there was a good reasoning, logic. There were discussions around why we would do something. What that did was it sort of instilled a level of confidence, right? That it was okay to take risks. B, it was okay to be wrong. And C, irrespective of the outcome, pursue what makes you happy, do what you want to do, right? So I was very, very, I'll say, privileged in that regard, that, my childhood, my parenting, my parents' parenting style was very geared towards that, right? So growing up, it was like all most Indian families you can imagine, right? I mean, education is very important, right? So that was I'll say the table stakes in our household growing up, is that you had to go through education. My parents, my father had a business where he made printing inks. So it was in the chemical industry, and you can imagine, like in the 90s, a lot of kids growing up, the idea would be what your father did or whatever your parents did, you would essentially follow the same footsteps, right? So that wasn't exactly the underlying message my dad at least had. He's like, yeah, get qualified and we will see, right? So it wasn't automatically assumed that whatever he's doing, he will just give it away and say, okay, no, now you go on with it, right? But the emphasis was that you got to figure something out. And I know growing up, because it was in chemicals, and my father and my uncles, they were all BSc Tech, etc. in chemistry. The question was like, well, are you going to do the same thing? And most, my brother is a double chemical engineer. Also doing his PhD. My other cousins are all brilliant. So I think the discussion is to be who's going to be engineer, and everybody would raise their hand. And so I think at one point I might have also raised my hand, not knowing what I'm signing up for. But I did start off thinking I would do engineering. I did not eventually pursue it, but I did. When I came to the US, I was going to do engineering, and then I decided not to do it. And this was a very pivotal point. That how would I go tell my father that you're spending all this money for me coming out here to do something? How do I go tell him I don't want to do it, or I cannot do it, more importantly, right? But my father took a very, and till this day, I'm very appreciative of that. He took a very, again, very pragmatic approach. And he told me, one simple thing. He's like, look, actually, you're better off being a first-class citizen in a second-class country than being a second-class citizen in a first-class country, right? So you be good at what you do. Don't be mediocre at something you're not good at, right? So go do what you want to do. And so coming back to my original point, right? That level of trust and confidence was always instilled. And I sort of carried that along with me. And I felt like I had to do something with that, what was given to me. And so here we are.
So on that, when you landed in the US, that was from Bombay, what were your initial experience? It's pretty dating yourself to think about that, but are there stories from coming from India to landing in the US? What were the initial impressions? Few of the things we see it on TV, but then landing here first time. Any stories that you have or something that you still get reminded?
Yeah, of course. I'll tell you, when I shows to how uninformed I was, right? And another question you asked me was, did you always knew what you wanted? And the answer is definitely no. What I did know, that I didn't want to go to the US to study. That part I did know. And I did actually figure my way out for that. But in the pursuit of doing that, again, coming from the mindset that you've got to go to the best education school, et cetera, right? I chose to go to this place, to a university called Virginia Tech. Most people may not have heard of Virginia Tech at the time, at least in India. So, what I did find out was a pretty good school, engineering school, et cetera, and I'm going to go there. I did get accepted. And so I had never been to the US. So I was envisioning the United States to be, now again, rewind back to the 90s, right? To be what you watch in the movies, right? So when I first landed, I landed in Washington, D.C., And of course, you land in DC, you're obviously mesmerized by the beautiful city and the monuments, et cetera, right? The first couple of days that I was in DC, staying with a family friend, it was great. And then came the time that they had to drop me to the university. So they drove me, and I figured it was like a few hour drive, couldn't be that long, but it was a 4.5 hour drive. And so, you start the journey and you start driving, and then you get past the city, then you get into the suburbs, and then you get past the suburbs, you get into the rural areas, and then you keep further driving down, and it's just rural in the mountains, and then there comes the university. And so my first impression was like, holy cow, what did I just do? I came from Mumbai, which was a city of 8-10 million people living in a small piece of land. And then all of a sudden here I am in Blacksburg, Virginia, where there were times when I first came, you wouldn't see somebody, coming out of your dorm room for like an hour or two because it was the summertime, so there were not many people on campus. So that was my first very initial I'll say shock moment, if you will, coming to the States, that I wasn't really expecting to be in rural Virginia, but also shows to my ignorance to how big, vast the United States is, and of course the culture. And I learned a lot more that most of what we talk about or we hear in movies and stuff is New York or LA or San Francisco, etc. Right? But you don't really talk about the Middle America or the small city America, right? And that's exactly where I was for about almost 4.5 years.
Did you at any point think that you would go back to India?
I did want to. I mean, for the longest time, I did not know what I wanted. I mean, I probably still don't know what I want, but I did know that at some point I'm going to go back. And that some point was, graduating from college, I was like, well, I'll work a year or 2 years, then I'll go back. And once I started to work, I was like, well, maybe I'll work another 2 years, then I'll go back. And then maybe I get married, then I'll go back. Then maybe we'll have kids. And that, is always 2 years out, but I don't know what's going to happen 2 years out. So I'm still here, and I think this is home now for me. I did want to go back at some point, but then, life happened, and no complaints though.
Yeah, I think one of my initial people that I met when I came here, he gave me a very good rule. He said, if you really want to exit out of West, you should do it in the first 2 years. Like if you want to really exit, like whether it's Europe or now in the US, but I mean, if you want to really if you think that you want to go back, you should be in the first 2 years. If you go beyond that 2 years, it sort of holds you. You just cannot make it out. It's like a quagmire kind of. You just it just sucks you in kind of. So I can imagine, but I think you made a good point. I mean, a lot of times as I talk to younger people in India, who like a lot of them have aspirations to come to the US for studies or UK or for job or whatever. I think what you just mentioned is that at your experience level after so many years, also it's tough to say what you really want, and your wants essentially are evolving, which means that you are not completely 100% clear on what you really want. So I think, do you want to talk about it? Like, how do you handle this? Like now you are a responsible, I can understand, a family man, you have a big job that you do, but to think that someone like you still struggles with it, how do you manage that struggle, and how do you overcome that or showcase it to the world that you are confident even if you don't know what you really want?
Well, first thing I'll tell you is that you mentioned I was responsible, and if my wife and my children were here, they would completely disagree with you. They think I'm definitely responsible. So to answer your question, it's hard. I mean, again, I think different people have different personalities over the years. And being in the industry and the type of work I'm in, I work with a lot of people, and over the years, I've sort of come to the realization that people are ever going to be equal in their thinking or their wants or desires and things like those, right? And so there are some people that I meet now, or even I see the younger kids. They know exactly what they want, right? And the pursuit of that really help. It doesn't really matter where they get it, but they know what they want, right? And that's great. I mean, I wasn't like that. I didn't know what I wanted, right? So what I did know is that in that moment, in that point of time, what was my next step going to be, and my next step, it was that right or wrong for me, right? So, and that's probably good or bad or whatever, whichever way you look at it. I've usually taken a one step at a time approach, and I felt like at least my early years of my career coming out of college, I probably took a year, 2 years at a time for probably 10 years, right? Because I realized now I'm married and I'm here, right? So I don't know if that's the best way or not, but I mean, it's been okay so far. That the advantage of that is that I've had the ability to pivot, right? So if there's something I didn't enjoy or like, I could pivot to something else. For a big part of, at least I know my career, and I don't know if that's true for yours, the green card process was something that just grounded me to one place, right? Fortunately or unfortunately. So then looking back in the rearview mirror, I spent 8-10 years, being in one place because of the pursuit of my green card. But the moment I got that, then all of a sudden, it felt like there was a sense of now I can explore, right? Now I can go to the things I want. Not that I didn't think of this before, but at least I had the ability to do that with less of risk to my personal self, right, and my children and my family. So I think I feel like each person is slightly different in that. Like, given my situation, that I came here not knowing exactly wanting to stay, but then as life happened, and then having certain limitations with the ability to go try different things career-wise, I think that didn't give me enough flexibility, if you will.
You raise a good point. I mean, a lot of people who come here, like want to come here, a lot of people don't know or know a little bit about the visa issues that Indians face to their path to green card or citizenship. I think that really is an obstacle for a lot of Indians, but can't get around it. But I think going back to your point around you being not sure and being able to pivot, I think on that topic, I feel having to be able to pivot and change. I think there are two schools of thought, right? As you said, like there are people who would say, "Oh, you don't know what you really want," which means you keep pivoting, right? But there are also a school of thought when you look at like Silicon Valley stuff, style of startups where things people do believe in minimum viable product, and people believe in pivoting as and when the market moves. Well, as you grow up in India, I mean, I don't know about you, but there has this, I think, the tendency around having to be very clear about what you want and just go after that, and that's sort of like a rigid mindset. I would say, to an extent, it can work out. Like if you want to be, let's say, you want to be an athlete or something like that, and you are really rigid. But maybe talk through your any key moments in your life where being flexible, if you think about any stories or which allowed you to literally grow, or rather than getting stuck. So like trying to understand whether having a rigid mindset or having that flexibility of doing pivot, which sort of helped you, maybe a story or anything on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. The company I used to work with before my current employer, as I mentioned, right, when I started my career, I was, working for General Electric, and then after that, I decided to come to Virginia. I got a job at Deloitte. I was with them for a long time, 15 years. I started in a consulting practice in Deloitte. But just given how the business needs were and things that were coming along the way, that and staffing, I was a young kid, right? They just put me on a project about doing something that I knew nothing about, but things went well. And I think the reward of doing good work is you get to do more work, right? Yeah. So that cycle just started to happen, right? I mean, again, not knowing what I wanted to do, I was a little bit like a leaf in the wind, right? As I sort of went with that. And so that worked out fine. And then I realized, well, I wasn't really sort of enjoying what I'm doing. Deloitte's a big place. They've been kind. I mean, I tried to do a lot of other things. I did work with the strategic consulting folks. I did work with the technology consulting folks. Eventually got into cybersecurity. And so, although there weren't like these, I'll say, major pivots in terms of, leaving an employer or not doing a startup, right? But just within that ecosystem, there was enough pivots, even from like a subject matter standpoint, that I just started to do different things. And that was because I was pretty flexible in that point of view that, again, having a little bit of confidence, can I do this? Yes, I can do it, right? Why? Because I've done it before. Maybe not the same thing, but in different, I'm just being thrown into random things. So just from a subject matter and understanding different things from my, work standpoint, I got that feeling that I can pivot. I can go from doing, just something like Sarbanes-Oxley when I started off to like doing, true consulting work, to doing cybersecurity work. And then, somewhere along the way, I built Deloitte's FedRAMP services, right? So that was pretty cool. That gave me a little bit like, what, I think I can work outside the framework. I can do something more. So I pivoted. I joined my current employer, Ankura Consulting, as building the cloud services. So in all those little realms of things, right, I've been able to pivot and do different things, and not just sort of stayed in one swim lane and, one thing year over year. Along the way, I've worked with a few startups, helping them in some advisory capacity or the other, bringing the perspective, especially, and you probably know the same, is touch a lot of different clients, you do touch a lot of different industries and people, etc., right? So there is the element of, getting all of that experience, right? What people gather in a lifetime, you can get that almost in a year, just working in like a few different companies, working with a few different companies. So I think I was able to translate all of that to helping some of my friends who have startups, advising them. Again, I was not able to work because of my green card situation, but they've been able to then now successfully do things. Their companies are, I'll say, still small, medium enterprise. Been able to do that. I've been able to, have a front row seat in their journey, right? And being part of that advisory group that helps them figure out like some complex things, right? So again, starting there, I started, doing core IT work for General Electric, then transition doing, Sarbanes-Oxley type work, and then transition to like different areas and disciplines, right? I've been able to pivot from those sense, and then eventually, what I do find myself in is oftentimes situations where I'll have friends or even now companies that come and say, "Hey, do you want to be part of this? Can you help us advise on this or whatever?" Right? And I think that in many ways is rewarding to sort of see that over the years you've been able to, amalgamate all of that experience and then be able to channel that in different things for different people.
So as you pivot, I mean, I have done my share of these and tried to try different new things, but I think a lot of people get scared to try new things. So when you, as you said, like you shifted to, let's say, cybersecurity, right? You have this feeling that you really don't know about that place, right? So when you try something new, the first year, you knew everything about the previous place, and then you start something new and you don't know anything. And I think there is, again, why I'm trying to connect back to our mindset, like especially growing up in India, you have this thing that, hey, you need to know everything before you really get into this. Like, you need to know the whole thing before you jump into it. And I think that's why you see a lot of people are hesitant to go beyond their lane just because they feel like, I don't know what I need to do on this, and I rather not do that and be stuck. So how do you suggest someone who is trying to do something new where they have not done, and how can they, what are the tips, tricks to getting started in a new thing? It could be in your career, it could be sport, or it could be a lifestyle. Like everything new is challenging. So how do you process it, or what are your suggestions on how to process new things?
So I'll tell you how I process it. And again, it's not exactly the most thoughtful way to do that. But my mindset always, growing up has been jump first and think later. So I wish I could tell you every single time it's worked out perfectly. It's not worked out perfectly. But I think, my advice to people who are starting to want to do things in whatever, aspect of life, right? Be it, learning, traveling, sports, whatever that might be, right? Is I tell myself, like, the burden of regret is going to be a lot more than the burden of failure, right?
Oh yeah.
So for me, I rather try something and fail and maybe learn and go from there or pivot from there, then constantly keep thinking, I wish I would have done that. And I do have plenty of those regrets right now. Right? And I'm sure all of us do, right? Oh, 10 years ago, if I had done this, right, then that would have happened, So the reality is that I think, self-reflecting back on some of those things of what I have missed on, right? And again, when I say missed on, it's mostly my opportunity to explore something. I think that to me is big, is just don't have the burden of regret. The second thing I would say is that, again, if you sort of make past all of those emotional things and then you get into the reality of dealing with something, right? I mean, look, anytime you try something new, the beauty about it is that, and if people around you, and I think this is important to make sure people around you acknowledge and accept, is that you're not going to know stuff, right? But so people are going to be, and if you've been honest and truthful about what your objectives are, I mean, people are going to be forgiving. People are going to be accepting, rather not forgiving, but accepting of that. But I think you do need to then compensate that by the energy and effort you put into learning all of those things, right? Because I think the currency of acceptance will run out pretty soon if you're not able to, learn and do the things. And again, it doesn't have to be, you can be master at it, right? The needle has to just move, right? And then at that point of time, it is something you have to evaluate for yourself. Is this something that you're enjoying that you want to do? Is this something you want to keep doing it? Or you got to pivot, right? I mean, the important thing really, and again, this is in most things, is that I think what I have learned is with every failure and whatever I've attempted to do, learning of what I would do next and what I want to do next, right? So I would say, I would encourage people, like, go try. Don't feel like you're going to stay back just because you haven't done something, but do things. Don't be wasteful of your time by just putting your head into everything. Find something that you enjoy, be passionate about, be thoughtful about those things, and then pursue it. And then as you pursue it, expect that you're not going to know everything, but do put the energy, effort, and time into trying to figure it out. Build a network of people. This is one thing that I did learn. I mean, people have been telling me this for years, and then I have acknowledged it and understood it, but I have not truly felt the impact of it until recently, is that, the moment you surround yourself with people, right? People that will help you be successful, that can be a true catalyst in a lot of things, right? Be it if you truly pursue sports, your career, relationships, and whatever, finding like-minded people or finding people that will really elevate you. I think that's very important. And I think that is probably the hardest thing that I've probably found over time. It's not the doing of something, but then how do you get yourself to be successful? And one of the key ingredients is that not only hard work and all those things are important, but finding yourself like mentors or people to surround yourself with, because success is never an individualistic effort. I personally believe that. I think it's what you do, but then it's also the people around you, right? Be it people who are helping you do it, your spouses, or whoever it might be, right? So having that sort of structure around you with people that will help you be successful, I think that is going to be an important ingredient, right? And then, again, the context is important, right? So if you're trying to learn a language or something, there's plenty of resources. Now, I mean, we live in this age where you can ask a question to ChatGPT and it'll kind of give you a roadmap or whatever you want, right? So the excuse of not doing something because you did not know how to do it, to me, is probably because somebody was lazy. But if you want to do it, I cannot imagine a time better than now to get it done, because what the availability of resources and what you can do with it is far more than like when you and I were sort of growing up.
So on that topic, let's do a pivot on ChatGPT you brought up, right? So you see in the US there has been the hype cycle around generative AI and ChatGPT. There was a recent interview on CNBC with Elon Musk, where I think they were asking what should the kids be doing, or what should the kids be learning in the world of AI getting stronger. and there are multiple things that I think there was a research from Singularity University around how by like maybe 2030 we would have much more powerful AIs than humans are right now. How do you process this thing? Like, so your value has always been on the number of hours you put into your job for the things that you would do, right? Like from your intellect perspective. Now, as you said, like with ChatGPT or internet in general, you have all that you need in your fingertips, right? So how do you process? How do you think the world will be processing labor in terms of like our career, like even people growing up thinking about putting some amount of effort into something to get money out of it. Like the hard work is just about that, right? You put in some effort. So with these kind of machines, as it happened with agriculture, right? Now we are seeing this thing happening on white collar jobs. How do you process for yourself in terms of the employment? And also for your kids, I mean, how do you think about this? Do you ever think about it, the impact of it, and is college more necessary going forward? Like, do you ever think about all of these topics, or any view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely. I mean, I have this, story that I keep telling my kids all the time, and my friends all the time, that when I was graduating, I remember distinctly the last exam that I ever took, because I was never the greatest student.
Hmm.
I made a promise to myself: this is the last exam that I will ever give, and I will never study ever again. And that I was so happy walking out that I feel like a big part of my life, big burden of my life is all over. What I did not know is that a couple months later, when I started with GE, it was an intensive program, and I would have been studying every day for the 1 month training program I was in. And there would be tests every single Saturday for 4 consecutive weeks that I was in that training program. So the lesson learned from all of that, and even over the years, is that training never stops, right? Learning never stops, and more, there are some that are induced by a profession, right? But more importantly, as people, learning never stops, right? And I think each one of us, and I tell my kids this all the time, that the hunger to learn should always continue. No one person will ever know anything, right? Mm-hmm. So continue to evolve, continue to learn, and develop your skills and enhance your skills from whatever it is that you have. It's almost like going from 4th grade to 5th grade. You have to enhance your skills, right? Similarly, in a profession, just because you're in a job doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to stay in that for like 10 years, right? Every year, a couple of years, we've got to advance to the next thing. And so being mindful of, because I'm in the technology space, I do have to be mindful of what is happening around me, right? So constantly thinking about what is the technology out there? How does it impact me? How does it impact my profession? How does it impact my clients, right? Those are things I think about all the time. The very interesting, discussion that I was a panel. I was part of the panel about, if you remember, like about 6-7 years ago, there was this whole talk about RPA, robotic process automation, and how RPA is going to disrupt, and there's going to be people without jobs and all that stuff. And then I remember, somebody made a very interesting point about this: is that, look, if a machine had to take your job, right, then you must just imagine how boring your job might have been that a machine could do it, right? And this is sort of putting it very simplistically, right? I mean, obviously there's a lot more complexity to that statement. But the reality is that all of our jobs are going to be replaceable at some point by some technology, right? 6 years, 7 years ago, it was RPA was the big thing. Now it's AI, right? But the reality is that, if you look back at history, and interestingly brought up the example of agriculture, and if you think about what happened in the early 2000s, again, this is just my part of it, right? What happened to agriculture, right, in the early 1900s, right? That agriculture was revolutionized by, engineering, and then all of a sudden, where if you think about most of the economies of the country, most of the countries and the economies, right, they were all agriculture-based economies. As more engineering came in, there were fewer people working in in agriculture. But does that really mean that the economy, people were just dying out of hunger, people were jobless? People just upskilled to something, and some out of necessity, some out of choice, right? So being, it's part, and I think we have to be aware, and I'm sure you've probably seen this in the last 20 years as IT and technology came along, right? Either you were part of it or you just got left behind. And I think that mindset sort of stays, that doesn't change, whether it is IT technology, whether it is RPA, whether it is cloud, whether it is, AI. There will be something that will also come after AI. So, and I'm a believer that either you're part of it or you're going to fall behind. And that's up to you, right? And that comes back to the personal attitude, aptitude, what you're willing to put into things to stay abreast. But I think it's going to happen, right? So for us to just think that generative AI is all and it's meant to make, give us answers quickly in a structured manner, et cetera, I think those are all good things. But the reality is that I guarantee there are people right now working somewhere to figure out how to use this technology to replace some really high-paying white-collar jobs. And so all of us should be thinking about how do we upskill, right? How do we find the next thing in our swim lane, right? Or find a different swim lane or pivot or whatever that might be, because it is coming. And I counsel this to people I work with and my coaches and mentees that I have, that you got to be aware of what's around you. Learn to read what's happening in the organization, company, etc., teams, right? It will give you a sense of either you're falling behind or you're part of it.
That's a good way to put it. On that note, with all this media and like all this knowledge online, right? So one of the things that I've seen a tendency is that we get this dopamine rush by just watching stuff or reading about stuff. So you have a huge section of people who are reading/watching, but like everyone knows everything, but you don't see any change. So people don't make any change, and they get this dopamine rush by watching someone else's. Like, so if you ask anyone on the internet about startup, I mean, everyone would have a POV. Like, oh, you know what? This is how you need to start up. You need to do this. You need to have a product market fit, venture capital you need to raise, and all of like 5-6 steps to get there. What I'm trying to get to is like in today's world where your phone or your media is essentially ever consuming your life, and you tend to have this moral high ground because you tend to watch more productive stuff and not translate that into like, I would say, real time. Let's say you watch a lot of fitness videos, but you are really not fit. I mean, the things could go on. Same thing with startup and all of that. So do you struggle with not taking action or tend to see that in others where you have a lot of info, but you really are not making any really like tangible change? I would say we call it bias for action, but lack of bias for action is what I'm trying to get to.
So if I understand your question, I think are you asking more about people consume all of this information, but are they acting on that information, or they just
lack of acting, and then it also could come from a laziness, or it also could come from how media is now, like the binge watching phenomena. So do you struggle with taking actions that you really want to take? If not, you could be very productive and you take actions, but do you slack or do you see others slack? And what's the way to come out of that slacking behavior?
I wish I could say that I don't slack, I slack. I mean, otherwise I could have been in different places, right? I could have been a doctor.
But how do you sort of try to overcome? I know everyone has their own vice. Like you go, yeah. I think being an adult is going from one bad habit to another bad habit. That's how I look at my life. I'll
tell you this. My wife and I, we recently started to talk more about like how we collective we, and then our children also, things we do in the house, the phone. You kind of brought that up as an example, right? There's so much information. You could drown yourself and you'll still never be able to even scratch the surface of the amount of information that is there. The question is like how much of it is pertinent, how much of it is useful, right? Or is it just entertainment, right? So we oftentimes, when I say we, speaking specifically for myself, and my wife, will spend time on social media, listening to what I won't call facts, right? There's a lot of these are opinions sprinkled with like, deviated facts. And again, it's hard, right? I mean, to determine what is fact versus an opinion now, right? But one of the things that, coming back to the action is we remind ourselves that, especially like now we work from home quite a bit. So when the kids are gone, we're home. I'm sitting in my office, she sits in her office, and we do work. And then when we get together, like, I'll just get coffee breaks, right? We'll come to the kitchen or whatever, right? We'll talk about, hey, how's your day been? Has it been productive? We remind ourselves not to slack, right? So if I'll see that, she is on the phone with some friend in the middle of the day, right? I'll remind her that, look, time is valuable, right? So let's do what you got to do, because then there are things that we have planned at the end of the day for us, right? We have kids studies, et cetera, right? So I think I won't say that I don't slack. I do slack quite a bit. But having some sort of like, again, I go back to this support system that you may have, like my wife and I, we remind ourselves from time to time. Let's sort of, do the things we're supposed to do and don't just get lost in, sitting on your phone for like 20 minutes and then sort of that breeds laziness, right? So be objective, stay away from like, I'll call short-term entertainment, right? Be it Twitter or whatever it is, right? I mean, we all find those amusing, but don't get drowned in it for more than a few minutes, right? It's a good break if you're in between whatever. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that there is a lot more that people may just, like people watch fitness videos all day long, but nobody goes to the gym, right? You don't need to watch a fitness video to go to the gym. Maybe with some people, and maybe that's a good thing. I'm not against it. Maybe it does motivate a lot of people. But more importantly, the 20 minutes you spend like scrolling through videos, you could have gone for a walk, or not that I don't think
you have yet to fall in. You have yet to fall into the TikTok rabbit hole. I mean, I don't know if you have TikTok, but I do. It's something that you can fall in.
I have TikTok. I occasionally, but I didn't mind. I mean, this is a dead hole. Like I get nothing out of it. This is short-term entertainment, and that short-term turns into like wasting a lot of time. So I avoid it intentionally quite a bit.
Yeah. So I think on one other thing I wanted to talk, like this summer is the time for a lot of people to move, especially. They move into colleges. It could be local, I mean, or it could be people taking decisions to move to the US, like the way you did it. A lot of them have a lot of apprehension. As you said, that 2002 is similar to 2023, where the markets are tight, and you are taking a big call to go and get into the US with maybe a debt, or even if it's not a debt. If your parents are supporting it, it's a big amount of money. How would you suggest them to process? Let's say if they're making a big move, out of China, out of India, coming to the US or West to study, with a recessionary fear, along with the AI fear that is all around white collar jobs, and whether you did choose the right course and all of that. So do you have any thoughts on that, like how to process, and if you were a young kid as of now starting again?
I'd say, man, look, and again, this is, I'll call like a bias that I have, right? Because of the field I'm in and the work I do. I'd say stick to tech, right? But I do know that, I have a kid who's really brilliant, but is so inclined towards, all things art, right? Just brilliant in all of those things. So, and she's really good in her maths and science too, by the way. But I know where her heart is, right? So, maybe 10 years ago, I would have said, yep, these are all nonsensical things. You just got to do what's right and just do the things that are going to make sense from a career standpoint. But the reality is that now that I'm seeing it firsthand, that not all decisions are driven by, at least for me at the time, was what is the most prosperous option, right? Sometimes the desires and situations are different for different people. So I would say if you're going to take debt and you're going to come here to study, I mean, know a couple of things that especially from India, that the H1 and the green card process is a lottery-based system, right? So it is literally a luck of draw, right? So number one, so make your investments or choose your debts wisely. Number two, if you are going to go down the path, pursue the path where those opportunities are the most, which is really in tech, science, engineering, math, right? So if you're going to come and do English literature, right, be mindful that those opportunities may be few, right? So be mindful of that. Jobs being taken by AI. The economy has only grown tenfold in the emergence of any technology for that matter, right? So I don't have a crystal ball to say what would be the next thing that would keep people busy, but I do want to believe that AI is going to create a lot of opportunity and jobs around. There may be new skill sets that will need to be created. We'll see. I know a lot of people are still building tools and applications. I mean, I personally know at least 10 startups right now that are using ChatGPT or OpenAI, some form of OpenAI in the background to create services, right? So right there, you can imagine that there are 10 startups that are looking to create more jobs, and that's just what I know, right? So I want to believe that this is an opportunity more than a fear factor, frankly speaking. But yes, as I said, don't get stuck behind, right? Be aware of what's around you, and then figure your way around that. Don't wait for something to go chasing it down.
Okay, so then I'll ask you more of a question around relationship. I recently met a young person, so I am married. I have 2 kids. And the question, and the person who was asking was that they were in their 30s. The question that I was getting was why do you choose to get married, or why do you choose to have a kid? In today's generation, a lot of people are questioning the concept of what's the right partner. How do you define the right partner in the world where, as information is more, even when you look at dating apps and everything, there's so much of option. I mean, if you were to dating around and stuff, how do you think, how do you make a choice in a world where as marriage as an institution, or having kids, something that you had, how do you think the youngsters should process that? Is there something that you are okay to say that the newer generation should rethink the society the way it is going to go? Or do you still believe in the way that we were raised, having kids and having a stable marriage makes sense still in today's world?
I think society and all these norms are going to get impacted some degree, right? And I don't know, statistically speaking, it will be a seismic shift in how society is. Personally speaking, I mean, there is a lot more now for LGBTQ and all those different things, right? So there is more awareness. There are more, I'll say, options and choices for people to live the life they want to live, right? Some may want to live with a partner all their life. Some may not want to live with a partner. Some may want to, have same-sex marriage, or whatever that might be, right? And so I think that, end of the day, if you ask about companionship marriages, I think, personally speaking, why did I get married? I got married because I was, wanted to be with somebody. I didn't want to grow old alone by myself, right? And that's how I grew up. That's what I saw growing up, and that's what I wanted for myself, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that it's true for everybody, right? Or that may be the right thing for everybody, for a variety of reasons, right? So I think I still believe in the institution of marriage. I still believe in the society the way we have it right now. I feel like there will be people who will want to either experiment or will want to try things out because there's a philosophical bend to something, and that's fine. I'm more of the attitude, right? I mean, if you want something, that's okay as long as it doesn't bother people. But I do believe that, long term, generally speaking, right, I think it's healthy to have relationships. It's healthy to be able to share things with your partner, your spouse, friends, or whatever that might be, right? And then eventually, it shapes the way we think about relationships, trust you create, bonds you create, right? The reliability you have on people when you're happy, you're sick, whatever it is, right? So I think, I'm sure by the time my children grow up, we'll probably see a lot more of what you're describing. My advice to them would be to still trust the
Institution.
the institution of marriage and stuff. But at the end of the day, right, there's a lot out there. There are a lot of different thinkings, right? Earlier, people may have felt like the peer pressure or something because they were not a specific way or didn't feel a specific way, and that's okay. But I want to at least hope that the vast majority of our society will still remain the same, although we'll have variations of different things. People want a lot more than when you and I were growing up, but I want at least society will still prevail.
Yeah. I think as we're getting to the close, I think one of the things that I always ask someone is, what was something that you felt was true when you were growing up, but you don't feel that is true now that you have seen the world? So few of the things, for example, could be that hard work is the only thing that you need to succeed, or dreaming big, or I think there are a lot of things as we're growing up we have said from our parents, but things that you feel that it's not that, or some sort of a cheat code or something that you have experienced over these years that you feel should work.
I'll say there was, I don't know, at least right now I can't think of something, or I don't feel passionately about something that I knew growing up but felt it's untrue. I would say there were things that I did not know growing up about, if you stick on the topic of success and career and whatever, right? I think as much as you work hard, along with hard work, there's a component of being around the right people and at the right time. You can call it luck, whatever you want to call it, right? So I think hard work is definitely table stakes in my opinion, right? For everything, right? You will probably get lucky one time, but you can't get lucky every time, right? So hard work definitely is table stakes in my opinion. What I think is a big variable that I didn't realize till much later in my career is that, how you surround yourself with people, timing of things plays a very important part. Maybe you eventually will get success, but that may prolong your time to get there. But yeah, I think that's something I did not know that I've sort of come to learn over time.
How do you do that? Like, so how would you expand a network that is supportive? How do you find that?
It is hard. I will admit that has probably been one of my hardest things has been to sort of, now again, when I used to work for Deloitte, it was a little bit easier because a really good group of very smart people, right, you have access to. But if I was just take myself out of the work situation and just put myself in a personal situation, now obviously we are in our lives where, we're married with children, the ecosystem we live in is fairly nuclear, right? So it's hard to always go identify people, right? So you can look for, internet is a great source. Like there are a lot of groups out there that you can reach out to find that sort of a structure to get again. And I'm sort of sticking to the theme of maybe you want to do something in sports, or you want to do something in art, literature, or career-wise, whatever that might be, right? There are a lot of groups now that you can maybe have access to, but again, the effort it takes to do all of that, and then for the other person to feel the same way about the process, and then believe in the process, and then being able to connect with those person at the right level, right? I think those are all hard things, right? but I would say, continue doing that. I think that maybe the only way I can think about it, again, that's just my mindset. Just keep doing something till the time you get what you want, right? But building a network is important, man. And then so I think at least with the younger people who are starting to grow up now, my one advice would be is, maintain and nurture your relationships, especially the relationships that will help you become better, right? As a person, career, whatever that might be, right? Maintain those relationships. I've been pretty bad about, I had a lot of friends, but over the years, I sort of feel like I've lost touch with a lot of them, right? So keep those going. I think now it's a lot easier with all the tools and things we have available to stay in touch with people. Maybe that's one thing I'll say is build yours to the younger kids, like build that sort of network and system, and then continue to keep up with it. It's hard. It's not easy. And I wish there was a book written on how to do that. But it's something you got to keep experimenting and be mindful of it.
Okay. I think one way of thinking about it is as an Indian American, like American Indian, I don't know, in the US, that there are a lot of people that I talk to want to know what makes us as a community of immigrants more successful, like in terms of like I think Indians on average earn almost double than an average American. It's a community which is rich. And then the question that they would ask me is like, why people who are here are so successful, and why a country like India is not able to grow that fast. That like a lot of these black people are leading these big companies in the US. What do you think is a disconnect with the folks in here and then the challenges of growing India at that speed if that smart people are there?
That's a good but a very loaded question. I'll tell you that.
I mean, you can go light. I mean, I would say, you just could answer it by what makes
I can give you a quick answer, but I'm sure like somebody listens to it will have a lot more point of views on that. But I'll say, look, in the US, I'll say we're fortunate, right? We're very fortunate to be here as immigrants, right? It's hard to be here. We know that. It's not easy to come here either through the H1 process or through other ways, especially for people from India, Mexico, China, and there are like a list of countries, right? And even others, right? I don't want to just say it's for India, China, and those, but like there are other countries too, right? It's very hard to come here. So I think people who sort of make the effort to be here are naturally a little bit more hungry than others who did not make that effort, right? So I would say that sort of gives you a little bit of edge. But once you are here, you sort of find yourself in this competitive pool of people who are like you, especially if you are an immigrant, and then you see, now second, third generation immigrants, right? Be it they were Irish or Dutch or English or whatever that may have been. Right now, they're second, third generation. There is a level of, still that hunger and desire to do more than just the ordinary, right? I'll say that. Two, I think the one other reason, and I'll say it is significant in the US, is really the systems that have been built over time, in the way, people perceive work, right? Right from a young age, I think more so than I've seen any other place, at least in India, growing up with even middle-class families, right? The culture of work, is trying to work at a younger age, getting an internship, or even starting to work, babysitting or whatever, right? There is that sort of culture that, hey, you've got to go be on your own, right? Nothing will be given to you. Yeah, I think a lot of us have seen that happen over time, that, there's generation one that creates something, the second generation sort of benefits, by the time it gets to third generation, there's very little left, right? So it's the classic theory, right? That, one creates, the second and third sort of consume, and then eventually you're left with nothing, right? I think the US, what I have seen is that culture of just giving it to your children or children's children, right? That doesn't, it exists. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it is not as much as we have in India. And the classic example, if you look at Bill Gates, you look at Warren Buffett, you look at all these other billionaires, right? They haven't just, given everything to their family and everything. Right? Warren Buffett, famously said, "Hey, look, I've left my children enough that they can do something, but I have not left them enough that they will do nothing." Right? So I think that is a very important part of what I think the culture, that really people have to go out and make it on their own. That's number two. So you try. And I think the third thing is also that there is enormous amount of resources that are available here, right? I mean, if you desire something, you really can make it happen, right? Simplistically speaking, I mean, if you want to be a startup, right? If you were to say that, in about 10 minutes, you can go online and create a company, which wherever you are, it doesn't really matter, right? You could be in Florida, you could be in Texas, or whatever. You could just do it online. And so there's an ease of which you can do certain things. There is the availability of resources. There's a classic, saying that I keep saying, is that find the purpose and the means will follow. Truly, that is true for the US. You find what you need to do, and the means of, whether it's monetary resources, they will come through. They may be hard, but they will come through. That is very hard in India. You and I know that, right? The fourth thing I'll say, there's an advantage that the US also has is, by virtue of being here, we have access to some of the most advanced sort of thinking, right? If you go to college and education system here, it breeds that culture of innovation. It breeds the culture of think outside the box. Just don't do what you're minimally told to do, right? That's why you'll see. And then the most important thing I feel like, number 5, I think, is you can take something and heavily commercialize here. I mean, think about a concept like YouTube. Think about a concept like, even a GPS system, right? These were all things that existed in the world in different countries, I'm sure, but the ability to successfully just commercialize it here, again, goes back to like the availability of resources, that you can imagine something, you can make it happen, right? I think those all, when everything comes together, then of course, given the level of freedom that you have, you can do whatever the hell you want to do. Restrictions, your hard work is your hard work, right? Nobody's controlling you and stuff, which I think India is now there. That it's a very similar culture. You can do whatever you want to, but there are other limitations. Be it government, be it resources, be it people, be it whatever, right? Those things also play in. But I think the US has sort of has those advantages that if you're here, you sort of have an entry into a system, and then it's up to you that if you can imagine it, you can do it. And I would say that comes back from an immigrant mentality, that if you made your way here, you had to do a lot of things to fight a big pool of people who could not make it here, right? So I think that would be my point of view as to why I think people in the US are successful. I don't know if they say more or less successful, but more people are successful here than in other places.
Okay, so as we wrap up, do you have any suggestion for any podcast or book or movies that you would recommend? Something that would essentially is mind-bending or something like that? Do you have one? If you don't, that's fine.
I don't have a mind-bending one, but there's one book I just recently started to read. It's called The Lean Startup.
Lean Startup.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not a big fiction reader. I can't do that for more than 2 pages. But I don't like to constantly read things that help me think and help me grow. So it's one book I just recently started. It's pretty good. So I'd recommend anybody that is looking for a book to challenge their mindset and thinking. So.
Okay, that's all we have. Akshay, thanks for your time. We will post all your details on that, and then we'll talk to you some other time again. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Abhi. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching the video. I hope you found this video interesting. Please leave a comment if you have any questions or thoughts.